bro. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you too.
You've been crazy busy.
Yeah.
Talk to me.
I've been all over. Well, okay, so one, it's tricky starting something like this and being an opera singer because just being a standard opera singer already takes a lot of time.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Besides learning a 3-hour opera in a language that you're probably not fluent in.
Right.
All the travel and the planning, the logistics, the rehearsals, and so on and so forth. So trying to maintain that, or more accurately, trying to scale it back in a realistic sense, and still
perform
let my hip opera thing be what it's trying to be.
So the opera, obviously, you've been doing way before.
Yeah.
Do you speak fluent Italian? Is it Italian? Is it Latin?
Most of the operas I do are in Italian, or most common operas are in Italian.
Right.
The other two most popular are German or French. Most people, like the ba 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 ba.
Right.
That whole opera is French.
Right.
I'm not going to go through, but typically Italian. Most opera singers, okay. I would say I could live in Italy.
Okay. And you'd be fine.
Yeah, and I'd be fine. It'd be a little bit of a struggle.
Right.
Like, I know enough Italian to get in trouble, probably not enough to get out of trouble.
Sure.
But I could.
Fair,
but I could live in Italy.
Nice.
I know, and I understand a gang of Italian.
Yeah.
But, I'm pretty. I wouldn't say I'm fluent, but I can.
I mean, fluent enough to be able to sing a goddamn song.
Yeah.
And I feel
that
like
I can do.
it's not so much like a memorization of what the actual song is, but I obviously with opera I feel like you have to kind of know what you're singing to know when the inflections come.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and that matters more than a lot of people think because especially for Americans, most of us only speak one language, and we don't realize how much nuance is in our language.
Yep.
I was doing, for instance, I was doing a show where I had to say. Sing a phrase that said, "Can you feel the strain of my woes?"
Can you feel the strain of my? Okay.
In Italian, and if you pronounce the word "pene" differently, it meant penis.
Okay.
But if you say "bene," at least I remember it being woes. I don't remember the exact joke, but I remember it was one of my first lessons. Like, it's like, no, listen, you have to say that because you're saying woes, but if you lean into it that way, they can tell like, oh, it's an Italian play on words,
right? And
you have to understand the nuances of the language well enough to convey that play of words, or else you're saying it and the audience is like, wait, did he I don't think penis? He even got his own joke. And stuff like that. So,
got it. How long have you been doing opera?
It's always a weird thing to say when I started because I did a couple opera competitions before I started studying opera. It was kind of my...
You were just you just had the skill down kind of thing? Or?
I was taking voice lessons because I was singing in choir, which is kind of a different animal.
Okay.
And while I was taking those voices, that's actually kind of how I got into opera. I'll tell you the full story because it's...
Yeah, we got time.
Yeah, we got the time.
We got time.
So I was this is... Okay. I'll start from the beginning.
Yeah, start it.
So in high school... I got back to the United States when I was 13.
From
Nigeria. I lived in Nigeria. I did pretty much all my growing up at that age in Nigeria. And even though I was born in Maryland.
Huh.
My parents...
Born in Maryland, they were like, we're going to take a
Well, my parents are born and raised Nigerian. I think they were just in United States for college.
Got it. And it kind of worked out for you, though.
Yeah, I guess it kind of did. But when I was like really young, they moved back and lived there until I was 13. So when I was in high school, I was 16 years old. One of my friends tricked me into joining choir. And I always say trick me because I didn't even know that schools had choirs in the United States. I thought choirs were something that were only in churches in Europe.
Oh,
and
okay.
I was very...
So your idea of the whole choir and singing
the
was
classical
not
music
even in
was
the U.S.
Not at all. I didn't know that there was... I literally did not know that there was classical music in the United States. Like, I knew there's some orchestras might be playing, but I thought they were coming from
like
Europe.
School. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I was just very, very far removed from the classical world. All I was listening to was hip-hop in my little bubble, and that was good.
Comes full circle.
Yeah.
Point,
So So I was, we're signing up for classes, and one of my friends like, hey, sign up for this class. I was like, what's men's ensemble? It's like, it's ensemble, and don't worry about it. It's an easy A, and Tim's in it, Gerald's in it,
Perfect.
JB, and I was like, yeah, I signed up. I showed up. Yeah, I was hooked.
Yeah.
And so I was already committed before I got in there.
Right.
Then I got in, and I noticed the class was shaped weird. And then at some point I realized, like, this is a singing class.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know how to sing, but I wasn't. I wanted to bolt, but I wasn't going to because Gerald's in it, JB's, everyone's in it. So
you're not going to be the one to dip.
Yeah, I'm not going to be the one to dip.
Fair.
Even though I think I saw the same fear in all their eyes because it's a room full of guys in high school. And so no one wants to look dumb in front of everyone else. And I found out later on that how this whole mess happened of all these boys being in this high school choir class and none of them knowing how to sing is the high school choir director bribed a bunch of his original members with a free trip to Six Flags for everyone if he could recruit a full men's choir.
Damn.
And so he said, if you guys can get 40 guys on stage for our spring concert, I'll take you all to Six Flags for free. There were 42 of us on that stage, and he took us all to Six Flags for free.
He took the people that got recruited to Six Flags as well.
And that was the deal, or else we wouldn't. High school kids is like, I'm not going to join a semester of singing class, so you can go to no. Yeah.
Six Flags is all it took. Yep. I'd still be like, fuck that.
No, 16 years old, free, like with all your friends, like one class, easy A, free trip to Six Flags. I guarantee you. And also, I think that was a little the sneaky part. No one was telling anyone else it was a singing class.
Damn.
Like, I didn't know it was choir.
Yeah.
I think some people knew, but, like, for me, I think they just lied because they knew I wouldn't do it. Anyway, so we started singing. I fell in love with it. And I was like, and that was the first time in my life where I knew what I wanted to do for the first, when you're 16.
It's kind of wild how that happens.
It was unreal, especially for someone as removed from, for instance, I didn't know about harmony. I've heard of harmony. I always thought it was like, oh, people living in peace.
Sure.
But as far as like the structure of it, I didn't even hear it. And I tell people this all the time. I didn't know why Boyz II Men had 4 guys. All I heard was the end of the road, not like the
whole inflection.
Like I didn't hear any of that stuff.
Most people I feel like don't, because I mean you hear the music and you're like, okay, someone put this together for us. But when you're involved in it, you know what to look for. Yeah,
it's an interesting thing. But so the first time in the class we're there and the teacher says, okay, you guys sing la, you guys sing la, wait, la, la, la. It's like goes at the same time.
Even that right there, I feel like you caught that it was off.
I did. I had to go back and restructure. I did. But and so having us do that and like me singing like one of those voices and like watching the sausage get made, if you will, I was like, oh, this, and I've heard this before. Is this how this happens? And then I could hear harmony like everything. Yeah. And I was like walking. It was like
you know those August Rush.
It was like those exactly.
You just hear the music. And
exactly. It was just everywhere.
That's tight.
Like those videos of people who get glasses who are colorblind all their life. That's and how it felt.
Oh, that's interesting.
I could hear like a depth of music I never. So I think all of that happening at the same time at 16 years old was just like, I'm hooked. This is magic. I'm not going anywhere.
Nice.
And so, and I asked my choir director, I was like, is there a way I can do this for a living? Like, can you grow up? When people say, what are you going to do? Can I do this? Yeah. And he's like, yeah, there are ways of making money. Yeah. I was like, okay, all right, I'm going to do this. So I started taking voice lessons so I can be a professional choir singer.
That's, man, at 16 years old to feel like you had that, I know what I want to do for the rest of my life kind of thing, and you actually went to get singing lessons. That's wild.
It didn't even feel like that. Honestly, it was like, I hope no one stops me from doing this. I don't want to do anything else.
And your parents didn't. Never mind. Your parents did. I changed. Never mind. That says a lot.
There's. I think everyone has the same because immigrant parents are very, and especially with my mom because when I came back, she came back to the United States with me as a single mother, and so she has that much more of a stake in making sure I turn out okay.
For sure.
And so when your kid comes home from high school and says, "Hey, I want to sing in choir for a living," you're not going to be too thrilled.
Yay, I support you. And down she's like, oh, I feel you with the whole immigrant parents. I mean, my mom, same thing. My dad's Senegalese, so I'm largely West African and Lebanese. And when we came here, their whole vision for us was not exactly what our vision was for us at the time. So I get that.
And
so where did the opera come into the high school? Because I know that was not operatic. The choir singing is just you're playing your part.
Exactly.
Right?
So the opera came in after high school. I went to Mount San Antonio College because they had the best choir department around at the time, and it was a junior college, so I can actually afford it. So while I was taking voice, if you auditioned into the top level choir there, and I was like obsessed. I get tunnel vision. Once I was in choir, I was like committed. So I got into the top level choir, and once you get there, you get free voice lessons. And I was like, great, I'm gonna get lessons so I can sing better in choir. And so I'm taking a voice lesson one day, and I've been working with this teacher for a while. And then one day he's like, you know, I think you can do opera. I was like, I don't want to do opera. Opera's loud. It's boring. It's no, I don't. No one likes it. No. And so he's like, no, let's try a few things or whatever. So, you know, we're sitting there, we're doing the thing, and he's going through an exercise, and he's like telling me different things. And and I'm there watching the gradual, like, and like feeling that shift happen. And I was like,
so you felt that happen within your own voice,
yes,
kind of thing?
Like you saw that he was like, try this and do this, and like pull this down, like, okay, that part's your larynx, okay, this part's your pharynx, okay, do, like, you know,
sick.
And like telling me like what to do, and then it's like, and then like the sound came out of my face, and I remember, I tell the story a lot. I remember like standing still and like saying like, how do I do that again? Like, because I didn't want to move, I didn't want to break it, I didn't want to mess it up. Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, how do I do that again? And he was like, you know, just you know, and we got through it, and it was like a half hour, a lesson that was supposed to be a half hour went like an hour long because we were both having so much fun. And I remember the whole next day I was walking around like, hey, everybody, you know, I was like, I felt like I had the superpower all of a sudden.
You kind of did, because
it was like,
it came out of nowhere.
And like in choir, we always want to sing really, really loud. And I thought I was like really, really loud until like, I don't know why. I was like, I think it's the American thing, like bigger, stronger, louder. But like, I just wanted to be loud.
Yeah, I get that.
And so at first I was like, I was excited, like, oh, look how loud I can sing. And then he's like, okay, but you have to learn how to sing now.
Right.
But anyway.
It's just controlling the got it.
Yeah.
But so the noise that came out of you pretty much when you figured it out, was that baritone from the beginning, or as an opera singer do you guys kind of go through?
No. It was well, typically we find our home and we stay there.
Okay.
And that's the weird thing about opera. With rare exceptions, you don't want to start training an opera singer until their voice is done changing.
Okay. Because then it really settles into what it is.
Yeah, because, you know, for a lot of people, it's like, or working out or like training a certain sport. And it's like if you're training a certain sport, you develop muscles and then like the body changes. And I'm already out of my depth, but I assume that you know, it's a similar thing. And so you don't really know what the voice is going to be until like way after puberty, like I want to say like 18, 16, like 18, 19.
Yeah, it pretty much is like sports. Even with like basketball, for example, a player is going to develop at 16, 17, 18, and then when they get to a certain age, you're like, okay, I know what size he's going to be, what potential his weight's going to be, what role we can put him in, power forward, shooting forward, shooting guard.
Exactly, and it's the same way because at that point, you're kind of making educated guesses. Because our voices do another thing where it's like settles, and for a lot of people, you know, they've been working as baritone for years, and then it's like, oh, I guess I'm going to be a tenor, or vice versa,
or
which can be, or that transition. Usually, basses, you know, basses out the womb.
Because they have that's the lowest of the
and I'm joking, like right after that's the lowest. Like I've never in high school I thought I was a bass. Until I met a bass.
Okay, and then you're like, that motherfucker.
That I was like, okay, he's a bass. What was I saying? The first fun story. The first bass I met, like in real life, was when I was in choir at Mount Sac, because I was in an a cappella group, and there was this new bass coming to Mount Sac from Visalia, and everyone was like, "Oh, okay, you know, like we have to talk him into being an a cappella group." And so, like, I was the president of the a cappella group at the time, and I was like, "Okay, I'll meet with him." So I met with him. I was like, "What's his name?" And they're like, Avi Kaplan." And I was like, "Okay, I'll find this guy and message him." And we talked, and then like. And I like heard him talk, and I was like, okay, his voice is, you know, sounds like a typical voice. There's a low end to it, but and then I heard him sing, and it's like my, you know, the hair in my nostrils were vibrating. It was just like, okay. And then I ended up living with him. And so I heard him like when he first wakes up, and he's like, I was like,
Jesus
okay,
Christ.
You're not. I was like, okay, it's just like a different kind of like. So basses don't get mixed. Like real basses don't get mistaken for anything else.
Right.
And they usually like if you're a bass, you stay a bass.
Okay. Because I mean, how much higher can you get your voice as a bass? Because you got that general low undertone. There's only so much you can do with
and some basses can sing high, but honestly, in the opera world, if you're a bass, you own it.
Okay.
Because basses are hard to find, and good basses are even harder to find.
Right.
And so if you have those notes, and I think it might be some chemical thing where the kinds of people who have enough testosterone or whatever it takes to sing that low don't usually end up singing. And so they're usually, because
they're used more for like
other things, like usually those kind of men end up in like construction or some physical thing, something more.
People with the bass tone, it kind of seeps into the rest
because
of the personality.
I feel like there's a certain amount of testosterone that creates a bass, and that level of testosterone, usually those guys don't end up in. Like most of the basses I know kind of ended up singing.
Right. Because people caught the fact that they can get that low, and they're like, "Hey, you should."
Exactly, it's like, "Hey, you can sing." Like you'd be on Easy Street if you were, or like a lot. For instance, there's this bass, one of I think the best operatic basses right now, Morris Robinson, huge black guy, played football for a long time, but now he sings opera. Yeah, and he's like king.
Interesting. I'll check him out. Oh, he's king bass.
Yeah, he's king like. Bass, I mean, people debate and like, and I'll fight anyone on this today. Morris Robinson is king.
I'll bet you know me. I'm not identified, but
that's
all. That's your
take. This is my world. Of operatic basses right now.
Yeah, hell yeah. So I mean, again, just because I'm trying to understand opera a little bit more, because my knowledge of it is kind of minimal. So there's 7 tones to opera, and there's 7 subtypes to a baritone, or are there multiple types to each tone that go down?
You did some research.
I mean, you were coming on. I'm not going to come on here and I appreciate
that.
Look into it.
You just mentioned something that a lot of opera singers don't. Well, some opera singers don't know.
Yeah.
So typically, you break up the operatic voices into what we call Fach.
Fach. Okay.
F-A-C-H.
Yeah.
And the 4 main groups of Fach are soprano, and from top down, typically women soprano, mezzo soprano, and then men tenor, baritone. Okay. And those are the ones that usually you hear about the most.
You can pocket everybody into.
Now there are men that can sing the soprano range, and we call those countertenors typically.
Countertenors. Okay.
Or you have women that can sing lower than the typical mezzo soprano, and we call those contraltos. Yeah. And then obviously basses, which they exist, but they're not. For
there's
some
never
reason.
a woman bass though.
No.
Yeah, because I feel like that.
No.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And then, but you said so. Male as a soprano is a.
Yeah. But there's a specific it's like I'm a countertenor, and and as far as I understand, they never want to be considered sopranos because they do a specific type of role in opera.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
They're usually playing. They usually do operas from a time period, from the Baroque period, because at that time women were not on stage.
Oh, okay.
And so they were played by younger boys.
1800s, 1900s.
And that's when you had the castrati tradition of keeping, castrating the boys so puberty doesn't happen, and they keep that high voice all the way through manhood.
That's a fucking thing? On purpose? Yeah. At birth?
Yeah. Well,
fuck,
at birth
that would not fly nowadays.
It wouldn't, but
does that still happen?
But yeah, I'm sure in some parts of the world it did. But and not to try and make it okay. But here's I think this was the culture at the time.
Sure.
Like castratis were the biggest celebrities on the planet at that time. Like they got all the women. Yeah. And they had the best sounding voices. They if your kid had some singing potential and you're like, I think he could be a voice.
They would kind of
snip him now.
Yeah. Oh, that's like making it in the movie business nowadays. If there's any opportunity to get him in.
I personally know some actors. If you can be guaranteed a career, it's like take them. Yeah. At this point, have you looked at rent in LA?
Yeah. Rent fucking almost anywhere outside LA is fairly reasonable. The minute you step into Los Angeles, it's fun. We make it work.
Here we are.
But that's well. So you went from high school, you went to college, you kind of found your voice because you found that level up, level down, figured it out, and then that led into. I mean, I know you played for LA Opera, or you sang for the LA Opera, San Diego Opera. There was one more as well.
Yeah, but that's
San Jose
kinda,
maybe.
Yes. Yeah. But that was kind of like a quantum leap of how I like to get there because after after he said, you should do opera, I was like, okay. He's like, look, there's this local competition, you should do it. And he's like, okay. So he's like, read the requirements. And I was like, okay, I need to learn an aria. What's an aria? And he's like, okay, that word is pronounced aria, and it's standard in opera. We're gonna find one and teach it to you, or whatever. So I got one, and I did the competition and I won. And I was like, okay. Sick. It was like a small town competition, but it kind of gave me that confidence, like, okay, I think I can do this. So then I applied to Cal State Northridge, and
I went to Northridge too.
Look at that,
Matadors.
Ole, yeah, ole.
That was my opera, but go on.
Yeah, it's okay. Wait, do the Matadors? Yeah, that's in Spain. Okay. Sorry, sometimes never mind. I'm weird about like this thing about growing up in opera. Like I need to make sure the cultural references are accurate.
They make sense.
Because people say "ole" when they hear Mexican music. I'm like, wrong culture. Yeah. But that's just me. Yeah. What was the thing? So I went to college. I got short version. Went to college. Yeah. Got a degree. Started doing auditions. Even like towards the end of college, I was like doing a small gig here and there and small, tiny roles in bigger companies and so on and so forth. And then I started, and then it's just like, a small role in a bigger company, and then they asked me for a larger role in that company.
Yeah,
and just kind of
it kind of developed into
Yeah, so life now kind of looks like most of the year. I try and keep it to under half the year, but most of the year I'm like traveling to somewhere doing an opera, and maybe about a couple months I'm in that place, and it's great to especially traveling on someone else's dime, and
always good.
And the fun part about the opera world is it's like there's this relatively small community of opera singers. Like we all kind of know each other.
Sure.
And we're all especially with Facebook, we're all friends. But having these gigs gets us a chance to get to see each other. Like, I haven't seen you in 2 years. Yeah. I did a show with you in Alaska, and now we're doing a show in Florida together. Oh, and I did the show with New York with my friend. I told you guys should meet. Now you guys meet and stuff like that. It happens a lot.
I listen to a lot of like stand-up comedy podcasts, like Brazilian stuff, and it's just pretty much sounds like the network of comedians where they all travel together. They're going to play in the same gig. Hey, I'm going to be in Salt Lake. You're going to be in Salt Lake. Sing together. And is the LA like operatic community? Has it always had a rich history? Has it maybe not so much because those sounds came from pretty much Europe, essentially, or Spain?
Funny enough, it is kind of impressive that LA has had the opera community it's had here as long as it's been, because most opera in the United States is on the East Coast-ish. Because, opera started in Europe. If you're coming to America to opera, it's like you get to New York, it's like, after that flight, it's like, we're here. We're not going anywhere. It's like, we're here.
We're not going west.
It's like, what? All the way? No. What are we? Yeah. And but there's been a thriving operatic community here. And LA Opera is one of the larger opera companies in the nation. That's awesome. The singers here, and that's like there is the national opera community, but there's also the LA opera community, and like it's also in each pocket. But it's
sounds busy.
It sounds
busy. Like a full-time job.
It is.
Yeah.
It
so you do that now.
That's all I'm doing.
Yeah, hell yeah, good for you.
That's all I've been doing
rad,
since then.
Dude.
I've been doing a bunch of like it's like every other artist in LA. You're doing a bunch of like other gigs here and there to try and like make ends meet. But,
like serving at the Cheesecake Factory.
Like serving at the Cheesecake Factory.
So for those of you who don't know, that's how Bobby and I are familiar with each other. We worked together like 4 or 5 years ago at the even longer than that.
It was longer than that.
Yeah, like 5-6 years ago at the Cheesecake Factory. I worked in the bakery. They wouldn't give me the
They wouldn't give me a fucking serving job. Bakery.
I was too good at what I did apparently.
I was like he's way too like I shouldn't say that. That's
you can say whatever.
I was gonna but you were good enough at your job where I felt like you should have been promoted. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. They weren't having it, so I was like, all right, I'm over it. So I did. And then I remember we used to be closing up at the bakery, and then you would be standing in the fucking thing singing the opera. That was like my first introduction to you as an opera singer.
Rotunda in the lobby of the Cheesecake Factory, the one in Glendale.
Yeah.
And when no one else is there and everyone's out of the back, I could stand there in the middle. Like if you stand in the center, it's this magical thing. That would just cut loose.
Yeah, and I'm sitting there by the bar like, damn, I can't do fucking even a quarter of that. If I were to try to scream like that, I'd fuck up my lungs. How important is it training, like taking care of the throat and taking care of whatever parts of the body you need? I'm sure that has like just as big of an importance as like the strength behind the singing.
It's extremely important.
Yeah.
It's everything for us.
Yeah,
like
I can imagine.
Yeah, it's like like athletes are with their body. It's like our voices were very, and we become very
Uh-oh.
It's okay. And I'll be fine. It's happening. You jinxed me. We become very sensitive, and we develop a very close relationship with our voices. And what's fun is finding what's unique for each of us, what we need
to fine tune it, kind of thing.
Yeah, to fine tune it. How to, for instance, I know if I'm going to sing if I have any real big singing to do in 24 hours, I need to drink enough water for my pee to be clear for 24 hours. Dang. And it's like I have this routine that I just like. That's where I want it because I need to be like well.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Is there any point where, I mean, obviously you started singing 16. You kind of fine tuned the opera still fairly young. Is there ever a point where it's like kind of too late for someone to really train their voice? Like if I were to try to sing opera, like I would tear my shit up because I don't know how to do it.
Yeah, well, honestly, anyone can start learning at any time. Where you get, I've heard some crazy stories of people starting opera for the first time and 4 years later they're singing at the Metropolitan Opera, and someone who's been training since they were 12 and has had very, very little success. Right. So, but anyone can train at any time. Okay. And well, sorry, somewhat within like after a certain age. And so as long as you can talk, there's the age where you would teach like anyone to sing anything, you can teach them to sing opera. How good they are and how much that's a scalable thing.
Interesting.
But yeah, it's really not as from the outside and because of the way how late I got to opera, I think it gave me a good perspective of what it looks like to common people. But from outside, it looks like we're going, like kinda, singing like that.
Kind of. It's just there's a lot of power behind the grandiose.
There is power, but a lot of that is just little clever tricks we use. It's kind of like without like spilling all the opera singer's secrets. But if you've ever taken a balloon and taken like just blown it up and then taken the top and just pulled the top, how loud that is and how far that carries, that's almost exactly what a lot of us do.
Damn. And you can control it to that extent to where it's like the motion of it is under control?
Like, okay, so think of like, and I'm like, this is the image that's going in my head, like with the balloon.
Sure.
And if I let the air out and I sing that it's like, it's like, wow. Yeah. It's a weird comparison.
Don't expect me, motherfuckers, to do that. I'm not gonna do that. I'll leave it to the pros. That's why I brought him on. Right. That's impressive, man. That's crazy impressive. But so that moment that happened, that was really like a big bang kind of thing for you. Because as soon as that note hits, I feel like you're like, holy shit,
It was like I can't go back.
Yeah,
so like, why?
I can imagine.
Yeah, and then like I spent every other time I had to sing, I was like, how do I do that? And then like, but I'm singing a lot of choral music, and he explained like, this is not the way you're gonna sing in choir, because in choir you want to blend more with and create one unified sound.
Yeah.
And opera, a lot of us, we want to like out sing the people around us. Right. Like, you're gonna hear me, because a lot of opera comes from showing off how well we sing.
Right.
It's like really that's what it is. I mean, you go see an opera, and there's a story. And they're singing to move the story along, but essentially it's pretty much like, oh, here's a part I'm going to sing. Everything else stops. The storyline stops, and I'm center stage, spotlight, and it's like, I'm going to sing the same phrase 7 times over in 7 different ways, and you're going to be on your feet.
Jesus.
And then you finish.
And you're in control of it for the most part. You when it's your line or your couple lines.
There's the conversation between the conductor, who's kind of our liaison to the orchestra, and us, because unfortunately, we can't do everything we want to, because there's an orchestra full. There's like dozens of people trying to read our minds, and they can't see us or whatever, and so there's some give and take. And that's where but a lot of times you tell the conductor is like, okay, this high note, I'm gonna hold it, and the conductor's like, I'm just gonna watch you, and let me know when. And so the whole orchestra, they're like playing, they're like waiting, and the conductor's like staring at you, conductor's staring at you and watching, and you're like, oh, and you like make your motion, the conductor's like, and lets everyone know, okay, the song's going on.
That's so much involved. It's a play, it's an opera, it's the band, it's the conductor, coordinating. How the fuck do you even coordinate 4 different? You know what I mean? Like, there's the acting, which is obviously has to be somewhat decent if you want it to be a believable play. The opera singers, you guys are.
I love hearing you say that. That's. I was curious if you would throw in acting in there, because that wasn't always the case. I mean, some light acting, but as the years have gone by, you're having to act more and more. Yeah. Back in the day, we used to do what a lot of in our field we call it the park and bark.
park and bark.
Yeah, which is you find your light, you stand there, and you just sing your face off.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you can't do that anymore because it's boring. After the
People
first,
have short attention
I mean,
spans.
opera is cool for the first couple minutes, and then it's like, okay, but like, well, what's going on?
Right.
What else is going on?
Right. I can see that.
And so, and so now acting is definitely an element, and so how that all happens, the process from that's why it takes like kind of 2 months to put on an opera from scratch.
Yeah.
Because we show up the first day, all the singers, they know the music already. So that part of the process, that's not included in 2 months. So they show up and then...
Was it already given it to them like, hey, you got this role, here's your thing?
And it's like, hey, we want to hire you to do this role in this opera. And he's like, yeah, cool. And the first time, it's like, okay, you go get the score, which is a giant book full of music, and you find all your parts, you learn it, and then...
Right.
But luckily, what happens after you've been doing this a while, it's like, hey, we know you did this role in this show. We're doing that show. We need you to do that role. Now you don't have to learn it again. You know it.
Maybe just
you have to fine tune things, and they're going to do it a little differently. So you want to, and that's what the rehearsal. But you show up, and they figure out the director's like, okay, you guys are going to be doing this, blah 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 blah, and it's like there's going to be this going on, and the conductor's the whole time while the director's saying you're going to be doing this, the conductor's watching like, oh, there's like a fight part here. Okay, so I'm going to need to know how to do that. They're not going to be watching me here, or oh, this part's going to be slower than I wanted to do it because it'll paint the picture more, or whatever the conductor decides to do. But he's there for the entire process while the director is figuring out.
Yeah, he's got to kind of know when things are going to hit.
And so he's making notes constantly. And so after a while, then he takes it to the orchestra and it's like, all right, guys, here's the plan.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah. This section, I know it says this. That's not the case anymore because of something else.
Right.
And so on and so forth. Then we all get together and we have a rehearsal where we just try and sing it. No one's moving. Everyone's just sitting down. And the conductor's going with the orchestra, and we try and get through it. And it's like, no, violins. And you do remember here, blah, blah, blah.
So does he stop? Like,
yeah,
if that stops you guys as well, though, because he's like, hey, I know you guys are on your note.
We know that rehearsal is like, it's not about us.
Right.
It's we're more an object we're more of a prop or background music for the orchestra to practice.
Oh, okay. So it's targeted. You guys are going there like, hey, we're going to work with the orchestra. Yeah. So you guys do your part if they need to. Got it. Okay.
And that's the last time we ever put the orchestra before us as opera singers. We're just very much like the world revolves around us. We are the singers. And just comes from an old culture of like, that's the way it was back in the day.
Like the opera is based around you guys and the singers. And it's like, granted, it is like the whole story grandiose. I said it fucking hopefully in the right context this time.
No, you didn't. Wait.
But great. That the whole picture is essentially around the opera singer.
Yeah.
It's an opera.
Yeah.
Like, it's not about the fucking orchestra. It just has to work well.
I mean, the orchestra is necessary, but they do bury the orchestra in the pit and put the opera singer on their lights.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Damn, dude. Do you guys have, like, the community, you're saying, like, in LA, do you guys do a lot of, like, stuff together in the same places? Or is it like, hey, I got a gig out in San Diego? Like, how do you guys, I guess for your own career, with everybody else?
Well, I'll say, okay, so in LA, and I think this may answer your question, one of there are always like big pillars that keep the singing community going in every area. And in LA, it is the LA Opera and the LA Master Chorale. Yeah.
Okay.
So the LA Opera usually sings at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion in downtown LA, and the LA Master Chorale usually sings at the Walt Disney Concert Hall.
Okay.
What's neat is they're directly across the street from each other, and they pretty much like. Often they'll park in one building and rehearse in the other, and vice versa, whatever. And so a lot of those singers sing regularly in those places. They do work outside, but typically, this is kind of like their home gig. They're not as much of a freelance. There was not as much of freelancers as some of the others.
An agency.
So, for instance, for me, I don't sing in the Master Chorale and in the LA Opera Chorus, but if there's like a smaller opera or a smaller company in LA that's doing an opera, there's a good chance that they may hire me because I live in LA and one of the singers from the LA Opera Chorus or LA Master Chorale, and we'll all do a show together or an opera or a party or something.
Very organized.
Like that. Yeah.
Very organized.
And if they have a gig out of town that allows them to meet their obligations here, they do that. Now, and every city has those, and that's the singing community. Now, of those singers, they may decide, like, if they get an offer to sing at the Met, they may say like, okay, I'm not doing, I might quit my, LA Massacre or something gig. And so that's kind of how that works. But there's a lot of us that just kind of float around, like we go wherever we need it. We don't have a home.
Is the Met like the place?
The Met in the United States is the place. For a lot of people in the world, the Met is the place. In New York. Yes, it's in New York, the Metropolitan. So it's one of the opera companies of the in existence. Yeah. So yeah, if you're like you're internationally, like what's the American opera? It's the Met. The Met is like the top of the food chain. The Metropolitan Opera is like all young American opera singers want to sing at the Met sometimes. Right.
And then it's just represented like the Met as far as like the upper echelon. It's represented by the elite opera singers in the U.S. that they bring in like, hey, you're part of our company.
Yeah. Like and a lot of singers, there's some singers that sing at the Met like regularly and just stay there. And for a lot of singers, if you get in the Met, you're like, okay, cool. I'm not going in. I'm good. I made it. For sure. It was hard getting here. I'm not trying to achieve anymore. Like I'm good. Yeah. That sounded dirty.
No, I mean, it is what it is. It's one of those things. A lot of people get to those like high level positions in any company or any sport or anything, and they're like, "Cool, I'm good. I got here."
I didn't mean to make that sound like I was knocking them at all.
No. I don't think it was that. A little bit, but I mean, it is what it is. No, but I'll say it.
Because if you like, for instance, a lot of people will consider if you work at a regular opera company and you work in the chorus, some people in the singing community say like that's like. A lot of people start off there and hope to go on. Right. But if you get into the chorus at the Met, you're making six figures a year. Yeah, dude. And you're
so that's an okay like
that's
I'm
an
good.
Okay like hey, I went to college to be a singer. I'm singing opera every single time at the Met. And I can support a family.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. The fucking moment, Hip-Hopera.
Oh, yeah.
Sickest guy. You created your own genre of music, essentially. Because I've heard little snippets of stuff. I'm not sure if you heard the Jack in the Box commercial that I've
heard about it.
Dude, I've heard it like 4 times in the last week. That Jack just says something about, it's an unlikely combination like bacon and blah, or like opera and this. And then some guy goes, bacon or something like that.
I didn't even know there was singing in it. Yeah. Jack, I'm not playing, dude. Hit me up. Like you want it done right. I got you.
I think that I've like heard little snippets of that, but I mean, your rendition, I guess you could say, of the hip hop genre is fucking awesome, dude.
Yeah, it's been a weird thing for me because, especially after that happened, I think every instance of someone doing a hip hop classical has been sent to me, or I've been tagged in. So I feel like I've seen everything that's happened before, and
that's great.
And I guess I haven't. No one's had the reaction that my music has had, and so. Right. And I'm glad for it. I'm glad for it. And I feel weird saying, because some people have like, they've had varying degrees of success, and when someone takes the chance to like step out and do something as I want to say like as artistically risky as combining hip hop and opera, it's like I feel weird like saying anything that puts it down at all because it's like
totally.
It's like I feel like you have to be a certain level of like off to even like. Think that's an okay thing to do, and so there's a courage there and thing. But I've seen a lot, and no one's gotten the reaction I've had. No one's had the level of success I've had so far. So, but I'm loving that.
Yeah, that's
it's weird because it's something I've had in my head, and I always make up ridiculous things that I would be embarrassed.
Yeah. Story of my life.
I think that's the case for everyone.
So where did that come from? What was that? You were just like you heard a beat and you're like. I can make this work.
So here's how that really happens. A lot because of most of my singing, most of my music exposure in my life has been hip hop. Like I said, I didn't get to classical music, and it happened on accident. And even then, I was still mostly listening to hip hop. I mean, I listen to everything now, and that's another thing. When I got exposed to classical music, I could hear harmonies. I started getting fascinated about how they worked in different genres, different styles of music convey different, how rock would use a minor thing as opposed to like, I don't know, some other culture's music where it's a happy thing. And, all our Christmas music, so much of our Christmas music is minor, even though we use that for sad stuff,
Yeah.
But I got fascinated with it. So now I have this, if I don't absolutely love that kind of music, I'm at least interested in it in some way.
The setup of it.
So, I got sidetracked. Where
just said the start of Hip-Hopera with you.
How it kind of tied into. So I kept listening to hip hop, even though. So I get out of opera rehearsal, get in my car, and keep the music would be hip hop. But often I still have the music from opera stuck in my head because I've been singing for 3 hours, and so I'm still singing it, but I has to line up to the beat.
I think it just kind of happened naturally. You're like, hold on.
And I think it's like maybe, I don't know what I'd attribute it to, but I have trouble if there's a beat going and I'm singing something, I need to line it up. It just has to like
It's innate.
Yeah.
Or else you get irritated.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. It's like, and I'm like that way about a lot of things. Like things are crooked. Yeah. I'm like constantly straightening things. Like when I go to Starbucks and they put the sleeve on it, I always straighten the sleeve to like face it. Yeah,
that's a whole other problem. Man.
Yeah, that's another conversation.
Yeah, we could talk.
Yeah, so I'll talk to someone.
Yeah, you gotta talk to someone.
So I would sing these same opera songs over the beat playing, and then I think a couple times that happened because I was doing a rehearsal for our Barbara Seville, where the Figaro song was from, and Humble was, that was a jam. It just came out by Kendrick Lamar. So I was singing in the car, and I was like, the structure of it, I was like, it lines up. And, based on the rules of performance, the way the ratios and with books and pictures or whatever, like, there were some parts lined up. And I was like, okay, this is cool. I was like, if you took out this part, and I was like, and I was driving from San Jose to LA the first time I did that. I was like,
so you got
so
enough time.
I had some time. I was like, I was like, man, it's actually kind of dope. And I did it, so I kept doing it by myself, just in the car, because I thought it was dope and it was fun. And I've done this with a bunch of some other songs before, but like this one was like really good. And one day I was like, I'm gonna record it. And my first thought was like, I'm gonna record it for myself because I want to just like listen to it. And I was like, oh, I'm just gonna like, so I put my phone up and I recorded it. I was like, let's put this on Facebook.
That was when you were sitting in the chair.
Yeah, I was sitting. I was driving.
Yeah.
And I put it on Facebook and. My friends, a bunch of people liked it, and then they shared it. I woke up the next morning, and it was unreal. It was weird because I think we all like getting likes and comments and shares.
To have something like, I mean that's just how the basis of society is now with social media. But to wake up and have something that you've been kind of like fucking around with, and you're like, wait a minute, this might actually hit, and just social media viral, things just spread. That's always fucking.
It was
fun
dope.
To see. I've yet to have anything go viral, but. We'll see. Maybe one day.
I hope when it does, you're ready because
it hit you like a whirlwind.
It caught me off guard. Sick. I was not because I've lived in this opera bubble. I mean, I'm on social media, but I wasn't like really, really on social media. Right. And so all of a sudden, it's like I was getting calls from everyone and emails and like tagging things, and then like people I hadn't talked to in forever suddenly remembered my number, and I'm like having to, and I was like navigating all this, and I was just like I was like I don't know, like it feels good, but I was also like. There's something I'm supposed to be doing right now with this, and I don't know what it is. I was completely blindsided. But what was cool is I got amidst all the noise, I was able to hear that people really like this, and not just like this attempt, like the idea.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
And I was like, and they want me to do it again. Like I get the sense that I was like, and I can do this. I've been doing this, and I was like, okay,
perfect.
So I made like another video. I was like, okay, cool. So I was like. I'm gonna make an album. I'm gonna try and make an album of this stuff. I was like, okay, how do you make an album? Yeah. Because everything I've done
it before.
Because I am a musician, but I work in a very old art form, and it's very
controlled.
And and also where I was in that art form is very simple for me. Mm-hmm. It's like someone's like, hey, I have this big project. I'll do all the planning and everything. I'm going to tell you what to do, where to stand, when to be there, blah, 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 and give you the money, and then you leave. And I was like, cool. And that's been all my, and I've been trained how to do that.
Right.
And so.
I mean, it's a very classy form of art. Opera is very prestigious. It's very, I don't want to say the wrong word. I don't want to say bougie. It's very, like upper echelon, proper. Essentially, as a whole, from what people's understanding is, maybe not entirely, but it's a classy art form.
Here's
that bothered you?
No, it didn't, because it's true. But here's what's frustrating: opera does not want that to be true anymore.
It's hard. It's hard to get that because opera's been around since the fucking 1800s.
And most of the time it's been around. That has been what it has been.
Yeah.
And I mean, it hurts to say this, but. We don't want it to be true because it is.
Right. Opera. But what is it against? What is it against that? Do you think it kind of puts a different, it puts maybe not too much pressure, but it puts like a light on you guys that you guys are gonna have to hey, we're not entirely that.
Opera
all the time.
Is too dope an art form to remain inaccessible to so many people.
Yeah.
And and at some point for a long time opera evolves, and it is still evolving, but just hear me out. There was it had a relationship with the popular music.
Okay.
If it wasn't the popular music, it would it would adjust. It remained.
Gets with the times.
It had and the elements of the popular music it kept. And to me, in the United States especially, it feels like at some point, and I don't know if it was with the advent of recording devices, we wanted to put opera in amber. We wanted to preserve it as is and don't touch it. And so attempts to try and breathe new life into it have usually been met with resistance. By the elites, by the people the opera has been for so long. And now, 2019, the world is, especially with the internet, the world's changed. Absolutely. And these people want to keep their doors open. They want to get butts and seats and sell tickets. Right. They want Saturday night to be packed.
Yeah. Like the good old days.
Yeah, like the good old days. Yeah. But their audience is still, senior citizens. Yeah. Across the board. And and because of senior citizens, because they can't, and I'm painting with a really wide brush here. Yeah, but because those senior citizens they're the donors, and because they can't keep butts and seats, they're keeping the doors open. Right. And so they get to make the calls of what they want to see. Jesus. Which kind of ties their hands behind their back of making. Yeah, absolutely. The Met tried to do. I don't want to say tried to do. The Met did a production of Rigoletto once, and they at least I believe it was the Met, and they set it in Vegas. And I was like, it works. It makes based on the storyline, you can put it in modern day Vegas because none of these nothing's new under the sun. It's we keep reliving. So I was like, yeah, that works. It ruffled some feathers. And I was just like, It was that much. Even as honestly, as far as I'm concerned, I was like, it was a small step towards, and you got to start somewhere. Yeah. But even that, I was just like, no. I'm just like.
Do you think you're gonna ruffle some feathers?
Yeah. Yeah. I hope I do. Yeah. Because that lets me know I'm doing it right.
Yeah, I hope you do too. I mean, again, this is one of those things where, from someone who's part of the local operatic scene here in LA or up and coming, and you kind of have your name established in the US as far as I can tell, this is I feel like a good opportunity for you. Let's say you do ruffle some feathers. It does it in a good way because you have the backing of the general public. The now. You have the backing of social media. You have the support of your peers and your friends.
Yeah. Oh, wait. I want to go back a little bit because I don't want to say that I want to ruffle feathers. I don't want to invite any negative stuff.
Of course not.
But I do want
to open the conversation.
Yeah, I want to at least open a conversation. Yeah. And I do. Okay, I'll say this. Fair. I recognize there's some people who want things will be very resistant to my kind of music. But and that for me, that's an indicator that I'm on the right path, because if I'm doing something different from from keeping it the way it is, then it's okay, cool. Then I'm changing it. And that idea of are you trying to change opera? Are you trying to bring opera in the 21st century? That's a daunting task. I don't know how to do that, but I know what I like to hear. Yeah. And I know as an opera singer, I know what I found entertaining, and I know what I'm capable of doing. Right. Totally. So I'm gonna keep doing that, and I'm gonna and I'm gonna grow it as big as I can. As you should. Because at this point, it really feels like it has a life of its own, and I'm just holding the reins. And it's I feel like I was giving a child, if you will. Sure. And I found it on my doorstep, and I was like, okay, so I'm listening. I was like, oh, it's the middle of the night. I guess it needs to eat. Damn. And it's I guess, I'm like, oh, I guess.
What time are we?
Sorry, I'm trying not to give away things that I'm things that I have in the works that I'm excited about.
Sick, yeah.
But I'm learning okay, Hip-Hopera wants to do this. Oh, I guess its name is Hip-Hopera. Right, okay. Right. I guess it. Yeah, and I'm just trying to be a caretaker of this within my family. But
you got to take care of yourself too, man.
I am.
Just make sure you're on your ball, and make sure everything's gonna come as is. Everything seems like it's coming pretty natural. And I mean, you went to a point where you're like, okay, I sang in my car. Everybody's giving me this. I want to make an album. How do I make an album? And then now you have your EP, De La Cita.
Yeah, De La Cita.
De La Cita.
Yeah.
Cita. Okay, yeah. Three-track EP.
Three-track EP. First track is Largo, Largo is short for Largo al Factotum, which is the name of the actual aria it's from The Barber of Seville. Mm-hmm. And so I thought I had to make that the first track, because in the opera, the purpose of that song is the character who sings it is Figaro, and it's his introduction. It's kind of like in the movie, that opening scene when you first see the main star and the music. So this is his. It's kind of hey, I'm Figaro. I'm the guy that blah, 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 blah. Right. And so I figured okay, if I'm going to really do this hip-hopera thing and make it a thing, this is going to be my introduction. Nice. So that was the first track.
There's a double meaning to it. That's tight.
The first track and the first music video I did.
Music video.
because I wanted to, and part of the reason it was important to me to do a music video is because I definitely wanted people to see this as not opera, like as something different. And it's like, and I won't say I'm the first to do an opera music video like that, but I'm the first to do a hip hop music video like that. So yeah, Largo had to be the first track. The second track is Nessun Dorma. So here's the story with Nessun Dorma. When I first started doing this, I got a few requests like, oh, do you do Nessun Dorma? And Nessun Dorma is kind of like the outside of opera anthem.
So those who aren't really familiar with the opera community,
if you're not like a hardcore opera singer, and you haven't it's like you want to sing an opera song, like a lot of people's go-to is Nessun Dorma. And it's like it's one of the most popular ones, and Bocelli's made it even that much more. And like
that's how I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, and then with the generation before it was Pavarotti. Right. And it's like everyone's like it's like the thing. So I was like, okay. Now, Nessun Dorma is typically done by tenors. I'm a baritone. I have those notes on a good day, and so I was like, okay, you know what? I need to knock Nessun Dorma out of the way because a lot of opera singers are tired of we are exhausted. We're tired of Nessun Dorma, not even from opera singers. We're tired of Nessun Dorma, of hearing Nessun Dorma outside of the opera world and then within the opera world. Like we get double. So I was like, I need to get Nessun Dorma out now, so everyone can get the Nessun Dorma fix. Yeah, and I need to go back to everything else.
That's smart though. So far it sounds like the build-up for the EP has your introduction with Figaro and Largo, Nessun Dorma to get it out of the way, so that everybody. Well, it's still relatable to a lot of people that might not be familiar with opera.
Actually, I want to mention how Nessun Dorma the idea first showed up, and I did it to kind of get it out of the way and make everyone. But it showed up because one of my friends was like he was sending me a message and he's like, dude, blah, blah, these people, like, you should have more shares, more like they're sleeping on you, man. You got to do something to wake them up. You got to do something to wake them up or whatever. And I was like, okay. Now, Nessun Dorma literally translates to none of you are going to sleep. Sick. And so I was like,
story of our lives in the dance music community. They know half these motherfuckers have been up for like 3 days anyway, as it is.
So he was like, so I was like, okay. And it's like, okay. So I was like thinking, what's an aria? What's an opera song about sleeping? Dormire. I was like, oh, that's right. And I was like, oh, but I have to. Right. So I got that done. And Cortigiani is the third song. So Cortigiani is an aria from Rigoletto. And Cortigiani was one of the first arias I heard. The name of the full aria is Cortigiani Bilurazza. You can just call it Cortigiani. In the opera world, we all call it Cortigiani. But, or Rigoletto is what people, I like to make an easy to digest word. And it's from the opera.
I couldn't say that whole word.
Yeah, but everyone knows Rigoletto. Like, you can say Rigoletto.
Rigoletto.
Yeah, that's it. And so
what was the one? Cortigiani versus
that was
Versace?
It. Yeah, but
what's the rest of it?
Cortigiani Bilurazza. Yeah. That was the first aria I heard on stage. I was doing a rehearsal for Rigoletto, actually no, I was learning the opera, but I heard it with orchestra. The first time I heard it with orchestra, I was like, okay, because I've had a lot of instances in opera of like hearing things, and I'm like, that kind of needs a beat. Like, oh, that already kind of has a beat in it. It's just like
hiding.
I'm like staring at the timpani. I'm like, you got it. Come on.
Yeah.
And it's like, but Cortigiani was the first one. I was like, I almost flipped the table. I was like, this song needs a freaking beat. What is wrong with you guys? I wish.
But that's your opportunity. Now you're the one to do it.
Yeah, and so I was like, you know what? I'm doing this, and I took Cortigiani is, I think I say the EP's been out long enough. Is my absolute favorite track on the EP by far because it is the closest to the kind of music I intend to do from here on out. It's the closest to what I want.
Yeah, it's leading to what your vision is.
Yeah,
nice. That's awesome, man. Sounds like you got a lot going on. Is there anything you can tell us about what's coming? You don't got to spoil too much if you can.
I am working on a video with someone.
Sick. People we may or may not know.
Yes.
Yes. May or may not know. We're not going to fucking tell you guys everything because that's the point.
Sorry, though.
Yeah, you got to stay all the way through these podcasts so you know what's coming up and where can everybody find you.
You can find me on Instagram at Babatunde Hip-Hopera and Facebook Babatunde _Hip-Hopera. Facebook at Babatunde Hip-Hopera And I don't tweet that much. I should tweet more. But I'm on Twitter too, Babatunde Hip-Hopera or Tunde Hip-Hopera.
I tried it. Twitter's one of those things where it's like impossible to gain followers, and maybe for you it might be a little easier because you have a craft. It's easier
and that's what happened. Like, I didn't tweet often. I found out that while I was going viral, I got and lost 1,000 followers on Twitter. I was like, oh, yeah, because I just didn't go. Like, once again, I was living in this opera bubble, and I was like, okay, I gotta get out there. Also, hiphoperaworld.com.
Hiphoperaworld.com.
Yes, it's kind of like the hub, because I would realize I want to kind of create a centralized location and stuff. So hiphoperaworld.com as well. YouTube too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything. Check out the Largo video. Check out everything this guy has.
Check out the EP. It's everywhere. iTunes. Is iTunes still around?
iTunes is still around.
Okay, I thought they were almost done.
No, they're from what I hear, they're taking iTunes and they're splitting it into podcasts, music, and I think books, if I'm not wrong. But they're going to take the iTunes app and essentially dissect it into three individual.
So it's not just.
So it's not. Yeah, it's not going to be gone completely, but it's still going to be like Apple Podcast, music, and then I think something else. I don't fucking know. Maybe books or some shit. I'm not too familiar with iTunes. Okay. I just use a podcast. Well, thanks for coming out, man. I really appreciate your time. What you're doing with this shit is fucking wild. Keep at it. I don't care what I'm not an opera person, so I don't mind ruffling a few feathers. But if anybody's starting to give you shit about it, fucking keep going. That means you're doing it right.
Deal.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Thanks, guys.